Welcome to this webinar on the general principles of the coding of medication errors with MedDRA. I'm Carol Ann Wilson and work as a medical officer at the MSSO and will be your instructor today. And I'm joined by my colleague Jane Knight, who was speaking to you before. We both will take you through this webinar that will take around 2 hours. So we have plenty of time for exercises, demonstrations, and for addressing your questions. And as Jane has already mentioned, please submit any questions you may have during the webinar through the question panel that you can find in the control panel of the GoToWebinar application on the right hand of your screen. And I will allow as much time as possible for questions, both during the course and also at the end of the presentation. But just a reminder, please do not raise specific coding questions as we can't help you with individual verbatim terms. But we can, of course, guide you in terms of coding principles. Now let's start. Many of you will already be familiar with the content of this first slide. The development of MedDRA was adopted by ICH in the mid of the 1990s, and ICH has finally become the owner of the terminology. The MedDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization, or short MSSO, was put in place by ICH to maintain, further develop, and distribute MedDRA on contract. All these MSSO activities are overseen by the ICH MedDRA Steering Committee, with members of the regulatory bodies and pharmaceutical industry associations in Europe, US and Japan, Health Canada, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in UK, and the WHO as an observer. And since May 2025, new members have joined the group, namely the Chinese National Medical Products Administration, the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, and a member of the IFPMA, or International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, again as an observer. Please be aware of the following disclaimers and copyright notices. ICH is not only the owner of MedDRA, but also owns this training material. It is protected worldwide. You may use the slides, with the exception of the MedDRA and ICH logos, but will have to clearly indicate that ICH owns the copyright. Also, any adaptations of the slides have to be clearly labeled. The second bullet point refers to warranty and liability issues you should be aware of, and the third bullet point is not relevant for us today. Let me provide you with an overview on what we will cover in this webinar as a start. At first, we will explore the regulatory background for today's topic. We will then discuss definitions and terminologies for product use concepts based on the ICH guidance documents. After that, we will look into the general principles for coding of medication errors, and then apply these principles in exercises using the MedDRA browser. And we will conclude with a question and answer session as already mentioned, but we will address your questions throughout the session as well. This slide now explains about the quiz questions, the polling that we will use during the webinar. The easiest way to join these activities is to scan the QR code with your smartphone, and it will bring you directly to the poll. And as soon as I activate the first question, you'll be able to see it and respond. Or alternatively, you may enter the indicated web address, paulf.com, into the URL bar at the top of your internet browser in your computer, tablet, or cell phone. It will then take you to a log on screen that you can see here, and you'll be asked for a username. The poll is completely anonymous, so you don't need to enter your name, but please enter my credentials as the username, that is Carol N. Wills 584 with no spaces, and then just click join, nothing more to be entered there. I just leave this on the screen for a moment so that you can enter the required information or scan this QR code. But should you lose connection to the portal during the session, just let us know, and I can also show the QR code in between. So let's see. Oh, we have plenty of people. I see people from, I think it's Taiwan. I see Indonesia. I see India joining us, and also I think it's Mauritania. Oh no, it disappeared. Turkey, merhaba. I see Spain, buenos dias. Italy, buongiorno. Many people in Europe. So welcome everyone. Happy to have us with us. To have you with us. So let's continue and let's get started with our topic today, that is medication errors and other product use issues. And we will first look into the regulatory background, because this is an important topic that is in focus of many regulatory authorities around the world. Medication errors are a critical and important problem in healthcare, and they are not only of great importance for the patient concerned, but also have a huge impact on healthcare costs. They represent the most frequent preventable reason for adverse events in the use of medicinal products. And since they are actually preventable, they are in the focus of regulatory authorities. Depending on countries and regions, they support the recording, coding, reporting, and evaluation of these errors in order to gain new insights into the extent and also the causes of medication errors, with the intention, of course, to develop improved strategies for their prevention to better protect patient safety, but also to reduce healthcare costs, because the costs associated with medication errors could be much better used in other areas of the healthcare system. Requests from regulators have also led to the addition of new terms to MedDRA, together with a restructuring of the hierarchy, with the intent to better support specific coding, but also subsequent data retrieval and assessment of medication errors and other types of product use issues. And they also led to updates and amendments of the relevant points to consider documents to provide more guidance for these coding scenarios. You may now think that this topic is only relevant to the post-marketing sector, but this is not the case. It is also relevant for clinical development, for clinical studies, because also in clinical studies, there may be deviations from the treatment schedule or dose, or there may be dose omissions in patients, etc., etc. As mentioned already, the PTC documents have been updated and supplemented to provide more guidance and assistance to MedDRA users on our topic today. Let us first look at the MedDRA term selection points to consider document. Here is the cover page of the latest version of the document, and you all know it provides advice on term selection for industry and regulatory purposes, with the intention to promote accurate and consistent term selection to facilitate a common understanding of shared data, so that we all speak one language when exchanging safety information. If you look into the table of contents, you will see that the guidance for medication errors and other product use issues like misuse, abuse, addiction, plus off-label use is quite short. So here we have 12 pages, 3 pages, and another 3 pages. Not really very long explanations for these topics. And this is really different with the MedDRA points to consider companion document that provides much more detailed information, more examples, and more guidance on medication errors and other types of product use concepts. It is a living document that is updated as needed. It is not newly released on 1st of March of each year, like the PTC document for MedDRA term selection. And here's the cover page of the latest, the new version 3.0, that was released in September last year. And as compared to the previous version, there were amendments to the medication error section, and new examples were added. And also a new chapter was added, addressing manufacturing and quality system issues, meaning product quality issues that are caused before the medicinal products reaches the actual medication use process in hospital or at home, so by healthcare professionals or patients, consumers, or their family members. And this document, you see, has much more detailed explanations and instructions. I can only highly recommend taking a close look at these chapters here. They are really very helpful to better understand the terminology and the classification of such events, with many, many practical examples. You see from page 13 down to 59. And just shortly, I would like to show you where to find these documents. So here we are. Here we have how to use on the MedDRA website, support documentation. If you click on it, following window opens and the points to consider documents are on the top. If you click on this little arrow here on the right, then you have the MedDRA term selection documents here in different formats. And here is the latest MedDRA points to consider companion document, again in PDF and Word format. So this is where you find the relevant documents. Let me go back here. And before we go into further details, we will have to familiarize ourselves with the terms that refer to medication errors and other product use errors and issues. Here's the concept description for the term medication error taken from the MedDRA browser. And I will show you the concept descriptions later on where to find them in the browser. A medication error is any unintentional and preventable event that may result in the improper use of medication or harm to the patient while the medication is under the control of those involved in the medication use process, meaning physicians, pharmacists, nurses, patients, consumers, or their family members. The second aspect that is highlighted in green is important to remember. These errors occur during product use in the medication use process, when the product is under the control of the healthcare provider, patient, or consumer. The term does not refer to errors that occur during manufacturing or are caused, for instance, by wholesalers, in other words, outside of the control of the healthcare provider, patient, or consumer. And the concept description further explains that medication and other product use errors may be related to professional practice, the products themselves, and healthcare processes and systems, including prescribing, communication of orders, product labeling, product packaging and nomenclature, preparation of products and their dispensing, distribution, and administration, as well as related education and product monitoring. The points to consider document for MedDRA term selection contains a table in chapter 3.16 where product misuse, abuse, and addiction are addressed. The table facilitates a high-level classification of product use errors and problems, comparing misuse, abuse, and addiction with the concepts of medication error and off-label use. And 3 criteria are used for this purpose. Was the deviation intentional, a conscious decision, or did it happen in error? Was it unintentional? and who has caused the event, who triggered it, the patient or consumer or a healthcare professional? And did it happen in the context of the therapeutic use of the product, yes or no? And you see that misuse, abuse, addiction, they are all triggered by patient consumers. The misuse is for therapeutic use in the context of therapeutic use, whereas abuse and addiction, of course, are not. A medication error is, of course, never intentional. It can be caused by a patient consumer or a healthcare professional, and it also occurs in the context of therapeutic use. And an off-label use is also always intentional, only triggered by healthcare professionals, and in the context of therapeutic use of a medicinal products. And you see in little asterisks here, and this is because definitions of misuse may not always include the concept of therapeutic use. For instance, misuse may be similar to the concept of abuse in some regions, like for instance, in German-speaking countries. So that's why this asterisk is there. So terminology is different depending on regions. So somehow we will have to, MedDRA also has to overcome this problem here. Now let me illustrate these scenarios seen in the table before with some practical examples. So here we have Lisa, and she has stress at work. In the first scenario, the doctor prescribes 1 tablet of a sleeping pill a night to help her sleep better. But since she is still awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, she decides to take another tablet. This is a conscious decision on her part, a deviation from the prescribed treatment regimen for therapeutic purposes. In other words, an intentional misuse of the medication, an intentional drug misuse. In the second scenario, a friend advises her to look for painkillers on the internet to calm down. She orders the medication and takes 1 tablet a day at first, but then continuously increases the dose to 4 tablets a day by now. Here we also have a conscious decision by Lisa to take these painkillers to calm down, so she deviates from the actual therapeutic indication and gradually takes too much of them. And this now constitutes a product abuse, here a drug abuse. In the third scenario, Lisa does not tolerate the sleeping pill. She is dazed after waking up, so the doctor prescribes her a painkiller off-label instead. Here we have a conscious decision by the doctor for therapeutic purposes, and we also know that this is an off-label use for an unapproved indication. So an off-label use of the product, the medication. Please note that the three criteria which are required for the high-level classification as off-label use, they are met. But for coding purposes, additional information is needed to finally code to an LLT under PT off-label use. Off-label use has to be explicitly mentioned in the verbatim or in the case report to be able to code this information accordingly. You may ask yourself why. Well, off-label use refers to the unapproved use of an approved drug in a specific country. And this information is not available for coders, usually, in most instances. Coders shouldn't make that decision unless off-label use is explicitly reported. Related guidance can be found both in the PTC document for MedDRA term selection and the companion document. Off-label use is a sensitive topic in the regulatory environment, and therefore this term should be used very carefully. Now the next scenario, finally in the fourth one, Lisa suffers from forgetfulness due to the stress she is experiencing thing at her workplace. She also forgets that she already has taken her medication one day and takes it a second time. This is unintentional, but happens in the context of therapeutic use. So this scenario now represents a medication error. The following flowchart visualizes the decision-making process. So here are the three core questions: intentional or unintentional, caused by whom, and in the context of therapeutic use, yes or no. Let us assume that the unapproved product use took place intentionally. This may be decided by healthcare professionals or by patient consumers. If this is a conscious decision by the healthcare professional and for therapeutic purposes, we classify these events as off-label use. These three criteria are required for the high-level classification as an off-label use. But again, please be aware that additional information is needed to finally code to an LLT under PT off-label use. Off-label use terms should only be selected when off-label use is specifically mentioned in the reported verbatim information in the reported case. An intentional deviation from the product information, if this originates from the patient or consumer and happens in the therapeutic setting, we classify this as intentional product misuse. If the deviation does not occur in the context of therapeutic use of the product, the deviation is classified as drug abuse or drug dependence, drug addiction. If the unapproved product use is unintentional, accidental, this can also be caused by both the healthcare professional or patient consumers. If this occurs in the context of the therapeutic use of the relevant product, it is classified as a medication or product use error. So here we are really looking at broad concepts in this decision chart, not at MedDRA terms. Please be aware of that. So of course, one should only assign LLT medication error, for instance, when no more specific information is available in the report. When more specific information about the medication error is reported, you'll find many very specific terms in MedDRA that do not only capture the accidental nature of the incident, but also more details, like, for instance, accidental dose deviations, accidental schedule deviations, etc., etc. You may now argue that in many instances, in many cases, it is not clear whether such a deviation was intended or unintended. Here you can see an example for such a scenario. It is reported that the patient took an extra tablet before going to bed. If no further information is available, we do not know the background. Did the patient misunderstand the doctor's instructions or the package leaflet? This would then represent a medication error. Or did the doctor mistakenly give her the wrong schedule with a prescription? This would also represent a medication error, in this instance, a prescribing error. Or is the patient's discomfort getting worse at bedtime, and so she decided to take one more tablet? This scenario would constitute an intentional drug misuse. Or did the doctor decide to use the drug off-label because he was convinced that the treatment would be more effective this way? So our case information does not allow for any of these classifications. So what can be done when getting similar reports for coding purposes and when no further information can be obtained? Now, for coding such scenarios, MedDRA contains very vague, non-specific PTs. If it is not clear whether such an event happened by mistake or intentionally, a suitable LLT under the PT product use issue should be used, a very general term. And if it is not clear whether an intentional deviation from proper product use happens for therapeutic reasons, a suitable LLT under the PT intentional product use issue can be selected. So these are the more vague terms that can be used for such scenarios. So the flowchart shown before must be expanded with these two neutral, more general concepts shown before. You can see the question marks here. Here they are. If it cannot be clarified whether an intentional deviation from the label by the patient happens for therapeutic reasons or not, the incident should be classified as intentional product use issue. And if it cannot be clarified whether an unapproved product use by an HCP or patient consumer occurred by mistake or intentionally, the incident should be classified as product use issue, a very broad concept. Again, please be aware that there are more specific LLTs and PTs for these high-level concepts, so more descriptive MedDRA terms that do not, and these are more, they do not distinguish between intentionality, also to say neutral. And you will see some of these terms on the next slide, these neutral terms that can be used. They do not contain the information accidental or intentional, and here are some of them highlighted. For instance, extra dose administered, or inappropriate schedule of product administration, or incorrect dosage administered, or incorrect dose administered, product administered to patient of inappropriate age, or product administration interrupted, product dose omission issue. So these are more neutral terms that can be used. So any questions so far, Jane?
Only one question, Carol Ann, just about what does the abbreviation LLT mean, but I've explained it in text. So if there's any follow-up questions on that, you can come back.
Yes, thank you. So now let me show you the browser, because in order to search for and select suitable MedDRA terms for verbatims that relate to unapproved product use, so deviation from the approved product information, the label, it is relevant to understand MedDRA structure and rules and the details of the points to consider documents. But it is also important to make yourself familiar with the MSSO MedDRA browsing tools or your own in-house MedDRA browsers. And I will now use the new web-based browser of the MSSO to show you where to find the relevant terms and make you familiar with their hierarchy. So let me switch screens again here. And I have it here. You see it's already open. So this is the new web-based browser. And you can see, let me close everything. I just tested it before our webinar, so everything has worked. So let me show the hierarchy. So we have to go into the SOC injury, poisoning, and procedural complication at first. And here you find the HLGT, high-level grouping term, medication errors and other product use errors and issues. And if you click on this little plus sign here, then the hierarchy opens. And you see the HLTs, high-level terms, and you see accidental exposures to product are grouped under this HLGT here. So accidental exposure meaning that the patient taking a drug, or not the patient, the man, the woman, the child taking the drug was not intended to take the drug at all. It accidentally took it or used it. So it was an accidental exposure. And then we have the HLTs for the medication errors and product use errors and issues. Here, the HLTs are grouped based on the stage where the error or issue occurs. Product administration errors and issues, product confusion errors and issues, product dispensing errors and issues, monitoring, preparation, prescribing, selection, storage, transcribing. And then there is an NEC, not elsewhere classified HLT, that groups terms that do not fit into any of the other HLTs. And this is where you will find the device use issue term, for instance, or the product use issue we talked about before. So these neutral terms that you can use when you don't know whether something was happened intentionally or accidentally, so very vaguely reported incidents. So when you look into the product administration errors and issues, you will see a lot of PTs, really a lot of them. So MedDRA is quite granular in this area. So make yourself familiar with these PTs and check in the concept descriptions in order to better understand the differences. And I will show you in a minute where to find them. Then we have, in addition, so this was one HLGT. We have another HLGT that groups the off-label uses and intentional product misuses use issues. And if I open this HLGT, you see the intentional product misuses, so intentional deviation by the patient for therapeutic purposes. Remember the definition of our flow chart. And then we have the intentional device misuse, intentional misuse of drug delivery system, intentional product misuse, quite a few LLTs beneath them that refer to more specific deviations like dose change, dosing frequency, product use duration, and intentional product misuse to child. Intentional product use issues would be where you don't know whether something, a deviation by the patient occurred for therapeutic reasons. So intentional device use issue, intentional dose omission, intentional product use issue, etc. And then you have the off-label uses. Here they are, off-label use of device, two separate PTs. And you see that under off-label use, there's quite a number of LLTs that are much more specific, really describing the type of deviation with the off-label use. Then there is an overdoses and underdoses not elsewhere classified HLGT. Of course, the accidental overdoses, they are grouped under the product administration errors and issues. Here you see the accidental overdose, accidental underdose. And so whenever a PT does not fit into any of the other categories, then it is grouped under such an NEC grouping term. Overdoses, underdoses, NEC, here it is. So this was the hierarchy in the SOC injury. But we, of course, have still the abuse and the drug dependence terms. And if you look into the psychiatric disorders and the psychiatric disorders not elsewhere classified HLGT, you see that we have here the substance-related and addictive disorders. And here you will find the abuse terms, the addiction terms, that are relevant for coding purposes, for coding such scenarios. So drug abuse, drug dependence, and then very specific terms underneath. You see antidepressant type abuse, cannabis, cocaine, drug, neutral one, laxative, narcotic abuse. So lots of very specific substance groups represented under this PT. So this is the hierarchy of the terms that are relevant in context of medication errors and product use issues. Let me go back to my slides.
Carol-Ann, we've had one question about off-label use and what you do with coding, how you code when off-label use isn't explicitly reported. So I've explained that you're going to be covering that later. I know it's a question that comes in commonly during this webinar. You'll cover it shortly, won't you?
Yes, I will. So, but I can do so already now. So we don't have a specific term that would cover this scenario. I have to say yet. I hope that we will get it in the future. So you will have to make your own decision whether you would use intentional drug not misuse, an intentional drug use issue term for such scenario, because you at least know it's an intentional deviation. I would, as a placeholder, hoping that we get a more specific term for such scenarios in the future.
So we had a related question to that one, Carol-Ann. I think it's the same question, really. Can we code a case as off-label use when the verbatim information is absent, but the available information is the product was used for an indication not listed on the approved label? So that's the same question coming again from someone else.
Yeah. If the case information really provides you with the information that what you are looking at is an off-label use, because it is specifically stated that the label does not cover the specific indication or the dose or whatever, then of course you can code to off-label, to a respective off-label use LLT. You should make sure that it's also represented in the verbatim, so you should add it so that it's clear for the coders, if you have the central coding group, that they can code to an off-label term. It's really a question that relates to the organization of the internal organization of coding in the different organizations. Many organizations have the central coding group, so they are coding clinical studies and pharmacovigilance data, and they do not have access to the case information. They do not know the country where the case comes from. They do not have access to the label in the respective country, so they cannot take this decision. They need to get this information with the verbatim. And so if it is contained, if it's clear from the narrative, from the case information, that it's an off-label use because it's explicitly mentioned that in that country, this dose, this indication is not covered by the label for the specific drug, then you can, of course, code to an off-label use term. Otherwise, you will have to use a placeholder, hoping that we will get a more specific term for such scenarios later on in a new version of MedDRA.
Thank you, Carol-Ann.
Yeah. What I wanted to show you as well is the concept descriptions, and here they are. So you saw I've just clicked on, let me, here this little icon, MedDRA concept descriptions, and there it already starts with app use. So you see the concept description. It's not MedDRA, it's not medical definitions, it's just how a concept is interpreted, used, and classified within the MedDRA terminology, explaining the background for it. So app use for the purposes of term selections, analysis of MedDRA-coded data. App use is the intentional, non-therapeutic use by a patient or consumer of a product, over the counter or prescription, doesn't matter, for a perceived reward or desired non-therapeutic effect, including but not limited to getting high or euphoria. So may occur with a single use, sporadic use, or persistent use of the product. Then we have one for addiction. We also have other terms like, for instance, medication error. So let me, here we can navigate because it's in alphabetical order. This is exactly the definition that I've shown before for medication error. And we have the off-label use, here it is. When recording off-label use, consider that product information and/or regulation requirements may differ between regulatory regions. So this is always a warning that we provide. So you have to know, in order to code to an off-label use term, you have to know the country of origin of the case, you have to know the label in that respective country in order to take the decision whether something represents an off-label use, yes or no. And then we have the off-label use overdose, here it is. For the purposes of term selection and analysis of MedDRA-coded data, overdose is more than the maximum recommended dose, either in quantity or concentration. In other words, an excessive dose. And underdose, if we look for underdose, here it is. Underdose is the administration of less than the minimum recommended dose, again, in quantity and or concentration. And what is also quite, in order to show you the granularity that we have in MedDRA in this area, if you look at dose and dosage, the dose is a quantity to be administered at one time, such as a specified amount of medication. That's clear. But what about dosage? Dosage refers to the determination and regulation of the size, so the dose, but also the frequency, the schedule, and the number of doses, so the duration of the treatment. So it's quite broader term representing not only the dose, the single dose, the quantity to be administered at one time, but also the frequency and the duration of the treatment. And that is why, if you're not sure, if you look into the hierarchy and you see all these terms, make sure that you really understand what is meant by the respective PT, what is meant by dosage, dose, schedule, duration, etc. Just a recommendation, because it may, otherwise it may really be confusing and lead you to assign incorrect LLTs. So here's again a reminder how these concept descriptions look like when you click on the browser. And here again a reminder of the hierarchy that I've just shown. So you have these terms, the HLGTs in SOC injury, and then also the HLT substance-related and addictive disorders in SOC psychiatric disorders. So these are the HLGTs and HLT, where to find the relevant terms. Now, what kind of terms can we find under HLGT medication errors and other product use errors and problems? We can find PTs for certain types of errors, such as wrong dose or wrong route, and terms that link an error to a stage in the medication use process, such as the prescribing stage, like product prescribing error. Other terms combine the type of error with a stage in the medication use process. Some reside under a more general PT, others are represented on PT level, as you can see in these examples here. Wrong drug prescribed, so it's a prescribing error, and we exactly can capture what actually went wrong, so that the wrong drug was prescribed, under PT product prescribing error, a more general term, whereas the wrong drug administered is really represented on a more specific PT, that is wrong product administered. In addition, there are terms for intercepted errors prevented by third-party intervention so that they didn't reach the patient. Here you see an example, LLT intercepted wrong dosage, form selected, under PT intercepted product selection error. And MedDRA also contains two PTs that describe the possibility of an error or signal a circumstance that could potentially lead to a medical device use error, or medication error. You see them here. One is potential for medication error, wrong drug, under PT circumstance, or information capable of leading to medication error. As well as more vague PTs, which can be used when it is unclear whether the reported incident was due to an error or happened intentionally. We discussed that before. You can see that the LLTs linked to medication error PTs are often more than just synonyms of the PT name. They often contain more specific information. For example, PTs for errors reflecting a stage of the medication use process may contain LLTs for specific types of errors occurring within that stage. So always search for the most specific LLT when coding to capture the full information of what has been reported, not only the stage, but also, if possible, the type of error that occurred. So, having heard all of this, it's now your turn. Based on what we just discussed, how would you code this reported incident? Dose taken was below the minimum recommended dose in the product label. Would you code to underdose, drug administration error, accidental underdose, or incorrect dosage administered? The dose taken was below the minimum recommended dose in the product label. Remember the concept description that we saw previously for overdose and underdose. Underdose is the favorite assignment here. Drug administration errors, another one, incorrect dosage administered. So here we are. Most of you went for underdose, and that's fully correct. It's not an accidental one because it's not mentioned. It's just stated that the dose taken was below the minimum recommended dose, and this is exactly the concept description for an underdose. So underdose is the correct assignment here. It's not an error. At drug administration, error is not correct because we don't know. It's not mentioned in the verbatim. So it's not an accidental underdose nor a drug administration error. And incorrect dosage administered is just what I've told you before. Dosage is a more broader term that not only refers to the dose, but also refers to the schedule and the duration of the treatment. So it's much too broad. And also we know that the dose was below the minimum recommended dose, so it really represents an underdose. So well done, most of you got it right. Next one, inadvertently took excessive dose of the prescribed pills. What would be your assignment in this instance? Inadvertently, we know, excessive dose of the prescribed pills. Incorrect dose administered, overdose, accidental dose increase, accidental overdose. What would you do? Again, remember what the concept descriptions that we saw earlier for overdose and underdose. Exactly. It is an excessive dose. This is exactly what is mentioned in the concept description for an overdose. And we have the information in this instance that it was taken inadvertently, so accidentally, unintentionally. Accidental dose increase, let me close the poll. Accidental dose increase, you would select when the dose was just increased, but still in the dose range that is covered by the label. But an excessive dose means that it's exceeding the upper dose level that is defined in the label. And overdose is too vague because we know that this happened accidentally, inadvertently. So accidental overdose again is correct. So most of you got it right. Perfect. Any questions, Jane?
No new questions, Carol Ann. Thank you.
Okay, so then let's continue with general principles for coding medication errors. And at first, of course, just a short reminder regarding the basic rules to be followed for coding with MedDRA. First of all, the quality of the reported information and the extraction of the relevant information during data entry are a basic requirement for good and meaningful coding. If the information received is vague or ambiguous, of poor quality, ask for clarification, query. Coding is done at the LLT level, and the LLT that most accurately, most specifically reflects the reported incidents and events should always be selected. Nothing should be interpreted, added, and no relevant information should be omitted. This is the basic rule, code as reported. And of course, only current LLTs should be used for coding. I assume you are all quite familiar with these basic rules, so I will not go into these any further. For coding product use errors and problems, the following tips may be helpful. First and foremost, you should be familiar with the MedDRA concept descriptions and the points to consider guidances, like the points to consider document for term selection and the companion document, so that you know where to find more detailed information, more guidance to achieve accurate and also consistent coding. You should also have a good knowledge of the MedDRA structure and hierarchy, particularly in SOC injury, poisoning, and procedural complications. Once you have found a potentially appropriate LLT and PT for the reported incident, check if the placement of the selected LLT and PT really, truly, accurately reflects the reported event. So this is one of the basic MedDRA coding rules as well. Always check the hierarchy. It is best to check the MedDRA hierarchy top-down when coding medication errors and other product use concepts, unless you are already very experienced in coding such incidents. And finally, if you can't find a specific term for medicines, vaccines, or medical devices, look out for a product term that would be suitable for your coding task, because you will not find the specific terms for devices or vaccines for all different coding scenarios. So product terms are then recommended to assign in order to capture the specifics of the incident. The companion document specifies some principles for coding medication and other product use errors. When to use the PT medication error, that is of course very, very vague. When to select more than one term. When to use the PT off-label use. How to capture potential and intercepted medication errors. How to capture both the specific type of error and the stage of the medication use process where the error occurred. When to capture the contributing factor leading to medication errors, that we should not infer a medication error, and also capture medication errors related to products with a drug delivery device. This section in the PTC companion document was rewritten and amended. It was previously titled Device Use Errors, Wrong Technique, and Device Malfunction. So if you are interested in these products because they are relevant for your company and your coding tasks, take a look at this section, as I will not be able to cover all details today. We will now address these general principles one by one. The first principle refers to the use of the PT medication error. As coders, we should not use this term unless we have no further information reported in the case and no further information can be obtained. If you have further information, then search the hierarchy under HLGT medication errors and other product use errors and issues, and select the most specific LLT that you can find. And if a specific error is reported, but no suitable term can be found, then please submit a change request to get a better term and assign the LLT that represents, so to say, the best approximation to the reported incident, just as a placeholder until a new, better term becomes available. And here an example. If it is only reported that a patient inadvertently didn't use the medication as prescribed and no further information is available, then of course the LLT medication error can be assigned, which is grouped under the same PT medication error. Sometimes you will get a report of a chain of events where an initial error leads to additional consequent errors or even adverse events in the patient. Then code the originating error as the priority, and all consequent errors in the medication use process and subsequent adverse events have to be coded in addition as reported. So if a prescribing error for a wrong drug is reported that consequently resulted in the wrong drug being dispensed and administered, the full information should be coded by assigning LLT wrong drug prescribed plus LLT wrong drug dispensed plus LLT wrong drug administered to capture these consequent errors. Because of course you would like to know whether the error finally reached the patient. And do not forget to also capture the contributing factors that led to this chain of events. We will discuss these contributing factors in more detail in a moment. But you should also avoid double coding the same error when this does not add any further relevant information. I will provide some examples later on. And here an example for this principle. It is reported that a nurse miscalculated the dose and the patient received 40 milligram instead of 20 milligram of his medication. He experienced severe hypotension. We would capture the initial error with the LLT dose calculation error. Nurse miscalculated the dose. This was not intentional. Plus the resulting administration error with the LLT increased dose administered, same PT, and of course also the resulting adverse event in the patient with the LLT hypotension, same PT. It is a chain of events starting with the dose calculation error that leads to the administration of an incorrect dose, and finally to an adverse reaction in the patient, a hypotension. We cannot consider this an overdose because we don't know the dose range that is covered by the label, so that's why it is an increased dose. Any questions, Jane?
No questions on this one, Carol-Ann.
Okay. Next one. Next principle refers to off-label use. So we discussed this already, but I would like to really reinforce what I previously said already. Always consider the criteria and information required to select a term under the PT off-label use. So off-label use relates to situations where a healthcare professional intentionally prescribes, dispenses, or recommends a product for a medical purpose not in accordance with the authorized product information in the respective country. It has to be a healthcare professional, it has to be intentional, and for a medical purpose in the context of therapeutic use. So these are the criteria that must be met for the high-level classification. The highlighted sentences were added in the points to consider documents that were released in March 23 and 24, and related guidance can also be found in the points to consider companion document. As a coder, off-label use terms should only be selected when off-label use is specifically mentioned in the reported verbatim information, or in the case narrative, if you have access to the case narrative. Coders should not take this decision when only the 3 criteria intentional for a medical purpose by healthcare professional are met, because it needs more specific product knowledge and information about the country of origin of the reported case. Local regulation and the product information may differ between regulatory regions, so try to obtain clarification, but if no further information can be obtained, do not infer that off-label use occurred. And regulators are really very clear on this, and you'll see that in all examples of off-label use in the points to consider documents, the off-label use is clearly named in the wording of the verbatim. And here an example, let's look at it. It is reported that a pediatrician decided to use COVID-19 vaccine off-label for his 10-year-old high-risk patient, although not yet approved for this age group. Does this verbatim fulfill the criteria for classification as off-label use? And is off-label use explicitly mentioned? So an HCP has caused the deviation. It was a pediatrician. He did it intentionally. He decided to do so, and based on therapeutic considerations. He wanted to protect his 10-year-old patient from an infection. And we are told that he decided to use the COVID-19 vaccine off-label, meaning that the vaccine is approved for immunization against COVID-19 infection in the respective country, but not for this age group. So the most specific LLT for this scenario is LLT off-label use in unapproved age group under PT off-label use. Any questions, Jane?
No new questions, Carol-Ann, no. Must be all clear to everyone, which is great.
Hopefully, I try to. So the principle number 4 refers to potential medication errors. Such incidents should also be captured, and MedDRA has 2 PTs for doing so. First of all, the PT circumstance or information capable of leading to medication error, and the PT circumstance or information capable of leading to device use error. The type of the potential error always needs to be captured in addition, and the PT circumstance or information capable of leading to medication error groups several specific LLTs for doing so, like LLT potential for medication error, wrong dose, or LLT potential for medication error, wrong drug, or LLT potential for medication error, wrong route, or also LLT database system product information issue. In addition, MedDRA terms that help capturing the contributing factors should also be selected, like for instance, LLT drug label lookalike. Why do some regulators want to receive this information, are actually very keen to receive such information? Well, in such scenarios, no medication error happened yet, but could, of course, occur in the near future based on the reported contributing factors, like drug name confusion, etc. When understanding the background for these potential errors, regulators can take steps to prevent these errors even before happening. So depending on your local regulatory requirements, do not omit such information, but capture all relevant information when receiving similar verbatims and code both the potential for an error by selecting an appropriate LLT under one of these PTs. And if a specific potential error type is reported and no combination term is available, split code. And last but not least, do not forget to also code the contributing factors or factors as reported or when reported. And here an example again. For this principle, a pharmacist reported that the blurred print on the drug label could lead to a medication error, that a wrong dose could be administered. No medication error occurred yet, but the pharmacist saw circumstances a circumstance, the blurred print on the label, that could lead to this error in the future. So remember, we would code the potential error by selecting LLT potential for medication error wrong dose under PT circumstance or information capable of leading to medication error. So it's a perfect combination term that captures the potential for a medication error and the type of error. And again, if no such term would be available, split coding would become necessary, and the type of the potential error would have to be captured in addition by assigning LLTs like wrong patient or wrong schedule or wrong rate. And in addition to capturing the potential error, we would also code the contributing factor that could lead to the medication error, here the blurred print on the label, by selecting LLT product label text illegible under PT product label issue. So always important to also capture the contributing factor for such scenarios. Are there questions, Jane?
Oh, no, Carol Ann, oh, hold on, one's just arrived. Like your previous example, should medication errors be coded with the outcome if there is adverse event associated with the medication error?
Of course. This is what I have shown previously with the chain of events. So if you have a report on a chain of events where initial error leads to additional errors, reaches the patient, so an administration error occurred, and then the patient suffers adverse events, then of course also the adverse events of the patient have to be captured.
Thank you very much. No, there aren't many questions today at all. Thank you, Carol Ann.
Thank you, Jane. Next principle, sometimes medication errors at an earlier stage of the medication use process are prevented from reaching the patient or consumer. So a medication error occurred during prescription, preparation of the medication, etc., but it is detected and intercepted by an active intervention of another person. When such scenarios are reported, the selected term for the intercepted error should represent the stage where the error actually occurred, not where it was prevented. Important to remember. And here an example for such a scenario. When it is reported that a pharmacist made a mistake when dispensing the drug, but the nurse identified the error before giving the drug to the patient, we should select intercepted drug dispensing error under PT intercepted product dispensing error, capturing the stage where the error actually occurred. We would not code to LLT intercepted administration error because the nurse did nothing wrong. The error occurred at the dispensing stage. So important to remember. Always capture the stage where the intercepted error occurred, not where it was prevented. We already talked about the stages of the medication use process when looking into the HLGT medication errors and other product use errors and issues, and the MedDRA hierarchy underneath. The slide now shows the different stages, starting with the storage of the medication, continuing with the prescribing stage, transcribing stage, preparation and dispensing stage, the administration stage, and finally the monitoring stage. One of the principal MedDRA coding rules, code as specifically as possible, capturing the full information of what has been reported, of course also applies to coding of medication errors, meaning that if a specific error is reported that occurred at a specific stage of the medication use process, we should capture the full information, the type of error, and the stage where the error occurred. You'll see that MedDRA contains many terms that capture both the type of error and the stage, like for instance LLT wrong drug prescribed. Others only capture the type of error, like wrong drug or wrong dose. So if the stage where the error occurred is unknown, you can just select the LLTs for the type of error. And others capture the stage only, like LLT drug prescribing error or LLT drug dispensing error. Again, if the error is not specified, you would just select an LLT to capture the stage where the error occurred. So always capture both the stage and the type of error when it is known. And if the stage is not known, capture the type of error only, or if the type of error is unknown, capture the stage only. When both the stage and the type of error are reported, you would look for a combination term in MedDRA and use a single LLT to capture the full information, when possible. As shown in the first example, when it is reported that the pharmacy dispensed the wrong drug, the LLT wrong drug dispensed would capture the full information. So there is no need to assign two codes here, like LLT wrong drug and the LLT drug dispensing error. This is an example for what I have mentioned before. Only use split coding when there is no single LLT which captures all of the reported information. Do not split code if splitting does not provide relevant additional information. But sometimes you may not find a suitable combination term. If it is reported that a doctor mistakenly prescribed the wrong strength, you would have to split to capture the reported information in full by assigning wrong strengths and LLT drug prescribing error. Any related questions so far, Jane?
No, Caroline. No new questions.
Okay. So we already shortly addressed the contributing factors when talking about potential medication errors. The new version of the companion document provides a MedDRA concept description for contributing factor. A contributing factor is a circumstance, action, or influence which is thought to have played a part in the origin or development of a medication error or to increase the risk of a medication error. So if a medication error is reported in conjunction with the actual cause of this error, then always select a term for the contributing factor plus the resulting error. Remember what we discussed earlier. Contributing factors are critical to understand why an error occurred and to identify interventions that can be undertaken to prevent the error. And that is why many regulatory authorities are very interested in obtaining such information about these contributing factors. But of course, there are contributing factors which are not in the scope of MedDRA. As an example, organizational system issues such as noise level, staffing levels. These may contribute to medication errors, but these factors may not have specific MedDRA terms. So such scenarios can be coded to an overarching term like what I mentioned before, LLT organizational systems issue, contributing factor. And the specific organizational system issues should be recorded in free text, that is in the narrative section of the case report. Here is an example that describes such a case. A doctor wrote a prescription for 40 milligrams of drug X for angina every 6 hours. But because of the illegibility of the prescription, you see it here, the nurse administered the same dose of drug Y, a calcium channel blocker, used in the treatment of hypertension, for which the maximum daily dose is only 10 milligrams. So because of the error made, the patient received 160 milligrams of this calcium channel blocker per day, 4 times 40 milligrams. And a day after taking the first 4 overdoses of the calcium channel blocker, the patient suffered a heart attack and died. So what needs to be captured here? At first, the illegible written prescription. the resulting medication error, the administration of the wrong drug, and the accidental overdose of that drug, and the resulting adverse reaction in the patient, the heart attack. Remember, it is very important to capture the contributing factor or factors if reported. And of course, also the indication for use, the angina pectoris, will have to be coded as well. The next important principle asks us to not infer a medication error. Remember another basic rule for coding with MedDRA. Code as reported, do not add or subtract relevant medical information. The same rule also applies to the coding of medication errors. If you receive a verbatim that describes a deviation from the label, an unauthorized use of a product, only select an LLT or LLTs that reflect what has been reported. Do not assume that a medication or device use error occurred if this is not made clear in the verbatim. If it is reported, for instance, that a nurse administered 50 milligrams of drug X, do not assume that this is a medication error. Try to obtain more information from the reporter or find out the dose range referencing the prescribing information of the respective drug. But do not interpret anything, do not add information when coding. Again, asking for questions. Jane, anything that needs clarification?
The only question we have is a specific verbatim term, Carol-Ann, so I'm just replying to the inquirer directly.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then the next slide and last principle we will discuss today, here it is, how to capture medication errors related to products with a drug delivery device. An increasing number of marketed products are intended for use with a drug delivery device, like a drug-device combination product, or are co-packaged in a kit or separately distributed but labeled for use with a specific device. Similar to what we already discussed for medications, safety reports for these products may relate to medication errors or to complications when using the device, like for instance needle stuck injuries, or to product quality issues as well as consequent adverse events in the patient. And as always, in case of incomplete or ambiguous reports, clarification should be sought to clarify whether the incident is related to a device issue or malfunction or a device use error by the patient. Let's look at an example taken from the new version of the Points to Consider companion document. It is reported that due to a new design, a pen was difficult to activate. A patient pushed the plunger button as hard as he could, but managed to deliver only a partial dose. The device quality issue, the new design, led to the problems when the patient was using the pen. Both needs to be captured, the device quality issue and the device use issue. It is a chain of events. The device quality issue is a contributing factor to the fact that the patient has difficulties using it. So we would assign the product design issue LLT, same PT, and this PT is grouped under system organ class product issues and HLT product quality issues NEC. And in addition, we would assign the LLT delivery device component difficult to use under PT device difficult to use that resides under SOC injury, poisoning, and procedural complications, and HLT medication errors, product use errors, and issues NEC. And we would also have to capture the consequent medication error by assigning partial dose delivery by device under PT incorrect dose administered by device. Again, it is a chain of events, and split coding is required to capture all relevant aspects of the reported information. So if there are no further questions, Jane, I would.
So we did have a question on that one about contributing factors, and I think you've explained it nicely there. So can you tell us, contributing factors are not all under medication errors. They could be across the or across the terminology, couldn't they?
It could be really product quality issues. It could be external issues. It could be confusion because of name confusion, or container or package confusion because they look similar. So many different aspects could relate to these contributing factors. Here it is a device quality issue. So the new design contributed to the fact that the device was difficult to use for the patient, and that finally a medication error occurred.
Thank you very much, Carol-Ann.
Okay, in the last part of this webinar, we will now work together on 5 examples. We will use the previously introduced decision chart and also apply the general principles for coding medication errors and other product use concepts that we just discussed. At first, you will have to assess the reported information. First, check for the 3 criteria for classification. Did the incident occur intentionally or unintentionally? Who has caused it? And was there a therapeutic purpose? Then check at which stage the error occurred and whether it led to consequent errors and even harm in the patient. If contributing factors are reported, they need to be captured in addition. Or was the report referring to circumstances that could lead to a medication error? Or was the error intercepted before reaching the patient? Because the type of report, the type of information that you get, will influence the way you search for appropriate terms in MedDRA. It will help you find the most suitable LLTs, the closest matches. Here's the first example. It is reported that the nurse forgot to administer the second of 2 chemotherapy treatments to the patient. So what can we take from this report? Is it reported whether it was accidental or intentional? Yes, we know that the incident happened accidentally. The nurse forgot. Do we know who caused it? Yes, an HCP, a nurse. And was it in the framework of therapeutic use of the product? Yes, it was. We also know the stage where the error occurred, but no information about any contributing factor was provided. So first look at the verbatim in order to have a clear picture of the actual incident so that you can search MedDRA in a more targeted way. So how would you approach this report? Which LLT would you select? Nurse forgot to administer the second dose of chemotherapy to the patient. Scheduled daily dosing taken less frequently, drug dose omission in error, drug use for unapproved schedule, temporary interruption of therapy. What would you do? Which LLT would you select? Let's see what you're going for. Drug dose omission in error, temporary interruption of therapy. Most of you are voting, let me close it, voting for drug dose omission in error. And this is fully correct. So let me first use our decision chart. In this instance here, we know that the incident occurred in error. The nurse forgot. We know that it was caused by the nurse, an HCP, and we know that it occurred in the framework of therapeutic use. So the incident has to be classified as a medication error. Now let's have a look into the MedDRA browser to find the best term here. Again, I will look out for, first let me close all the collapse all so that we have a clear picture here. So let us look in the injury SOC, top down. We saw there is the HLGT medication errors and other product use errors and issues. So we know that the nurse forgot to administer the second of 2 chemotherapy treatments. So it was a drug dose omission. And because we know that the nurse forgot, it was an accidental one. So here we have the administration errors and issues. That would be the HLT. We would look for a very more specific PT that we could select. Drug dose, product dose omission. Here we have product dose omission and error and product dose omission issue. We said that the error term is the correct one because the nurse forgot. So drug dose, often you have the product name on PT level in more specific terms for the specific medicinal products underneath on LLT level. Here we have the drug dose omission in error. Forgot to take the product, missed dose in error, product dose omission in error. So drug dose omission in error, missed dose in error. I would select drug dose omission in error. The others are synonyms, but that would be the most suitable term. So what about the other terms? Inappropriate schedule. Inappropriate schedule of product administration. You see a lot of terms in here under this PT. This one of these LLTs would be selected when it is reported that dose omissions occur regularly, take place more often, like when a patient takes a once daily dose less frequently. Yeah, here we have once daily dose taken less frequently, for instance. So these LLTs are not suitable for our scenario. Drug use for unapproved schedule is actually grouped under the product use issue. Drug use, where is it? For unapproved schedule. Here it is, drug use for unapproved schedule. So this is a very vague term, product use issue term. This is the PT. We know it was an accidental incident, and it was on the at the administration stage. So we always should capture the stage where the error occurred and the specific type of error. And this is what we do with the drug dose omission in error. Therapy interruption was another option, and some of you have voted for it. First of all, we don't know whether the therapy was really interrupted. It may be that the patient received the dose later on, or it may even have continued. He have just missed one dose. So therapy interrupted, temporary interruption of therapy. If I click on this LLT, right mouse click, and say open details and occurrences, you see that this is grouped under surgical and medical procedures. So it's considered a surgical or medical procedure that the interruption was made because of medical reasons, for instance. So this would be a scenario where we would use this term, but we know it was an accidental incident, and we would need to capture the accidental nature of this incident. So let me switch back to my slides. Here again, the different options from the poll. Drug dose omission and error would be the correct assignments, and here inappropriate schedule would only be chosen if this drug dose omission happens regularly during this treatment. Drug dose omission would be too vague. We know it was in error. Drug use for unapproved schedule, again too vague. grouped under product use issue, and temporary interruption of therapy is considered a surgical intervention, a medical decision to interrupt the therapy for medical reasons, like for hospitalization and planned surgery. So here we are with the correct term selection. It is drug dose omission and error under product dose omission and error. Are there questions, Jane?
No, Carol Ann. No, there are no questions.
Okay. I think this example is quite straightforward.
Yes. Yes.
So next
Carry
one.
on.
Here it is reported that a patient did not read the instructions thoroughly and then took his drug twice a day and not just once a day for the prescribed 2 weeks. So there was a prescribed 2 weeks duration of the treatment. The patient took it for 2 weeks, but he took it twice a day and not just once a day because he didn't read the instructions thoroughly. So again, our questions, first look at the verbatim. Was it accidental or intentional? He hasn't read the instructions thoroughly, so it was accidental. Who has caused the incident? The patient, we know that. Was it for a therapeutic purpose? It was in the context of therapeutic use of the product, yes. And at which stage in the medication use process did the incident occur? Well, the patient took it. It was at the administration stage, but no contributing factor, or is the fact that he didn't read the instructions thoroughly a contributing factor? You have to decide. So patient hasn't read the instructions thoroughly and took this drug twice a day and not just once a day during the prescribed 2 weeks treatment duration. Which LRTs would you assign, or which LRT would you assign? Drug administration error, extra dose administered, once daily dose taken more frequently, increased dose administered, incorrect drug administration duration, and or product leaflet instructions confusion. These are the options. I see you voting. So let's look what you're going for. Oh, we have split of opinions here. So the most popular assignment is once daily dose taken more frequently. You would also, some of you would also consider product leaflet instructions confusion, drug administration error, extra dose administered, incorrect drug administration duration. So let me close the poll and let us first look at our decision chart to classify the incident first. We know that the incident happened accidentally. We know that it was caused by the patient. And we know that it was in the context of the therapeutic use of the drug. So meaning that the verbatim describes a medication error. So now again, let me search for the most appropriate terms in MedDRA. Again, let me collapse. Oh, why doesn't it? Doesn't want to. Yes, here it is. So I will use the search function here again. So drug administration error. Oops. Here we are. Drug administration error. When I click, right mouse click and say go to browser, I will be able to see this LLT in the hierarchy. Here it is, drug administration error, under product administration error. It represents the concept, but we have more specific information about the administration error. The patient took the drug twice a day instead of once a day as instructed. This is why it is much too vague. So if I go for extra dose and administered, here we are again, go to browser. Extra dose administered, no further LLTs underneath. So this would mean a single event where extra dose was administered. It is not a regular administration of an extra dose. It's just one extra dose that was administered or occasionally administered. So let's look and search for a PT representing a deviation from the correct administration schedule, inappropriate schedule of product administration. And here we have once daily dose taken more frequently. So this is exactly what has been reported in our case. Patient hasn't read the instructions thoroughly and took his drug twice a day and not just once a day during the prescribed 2 weeks treatment duration. Another option was the increased dose administered. But nothing, we had no information. Also representing, of course, an administration error. No, I'm not good in typing. Here we are. Go to browser. Here we have the product administration error. Increased dose administered. Here it is. So it has its own PT. But this is not correct because nothing was wrong with the dose. The patient took the correct dose, single dose, but took it twice instead of once per day. So the dose was correct. And the other option was incorrect drug administration duration. Here we are. Go to browser. Has its own PT, incorrect product administration duration, too long, too short, not completed. So these are the LLTs, but it is unsuitable as well because nothing was wrong with the overall duration of the treatment. The patient took the drug for 2 weeks as prescribed and did not deviate from the prescription in this regard. He just took it twice a day instead of once a day. Now, what about the contributing factors? Some of you have looked for or voted for the product leaflet instructions confusion. So if I search for product confusion, and again, go to the browser, you will see that we are in a separate, here we are, separate HLT, product confusion errors and issues. And we have the product confusion, a very vague term. And under product label confusion, we have the product leaflet instructions confusion. These terms do not reflect what has been reported in our case. So the patient didn't read the instructions thoroughly. It was not reported that the instructions themselves were confusing. He just didn't read it thoroughly because he was stressed or didn't have the time and thought he would already know how to take this drug whatsoever. But nothing was wrong with the leaflet instructions. At least it was not reported. So this would be incorrect as well. Now let me switch back to my presentation. Here again, the options that we had and the respective hierarchy. So once daily dose taken more frequently is exactly what has been reported in our case. Here we are, once daily dose taken more frequently, inappropriate schedule of product administration. Most of you voted for this LLT. The others, just be aware that always look at the exact wording of your verbatim and try to make sense of it. Use the most specific LLT that you can find. In this instance, a term that represents or reflects an incorrect schedule of drug administration. Other questions, Jane?
Yes, we do have a question on this one, Carol Ann. The question is, but if the medication is prescribed, it will not be enough for 2 weeks if he takes it twice a day. So would you then also code that it's too short?
Yeah, we don't know that. If it's a bottle, maybe it's a package of 20 and the patient only has to take, or it's a patient of 40 and the patient only has to take it once a day, so 20 are left. We don't know that. So that's why I would really keep to what is reported and say, well, once daily dose taken more frequently. We don't know whether the duration, it could be, yes, it's good observation, but good question, but it's not reported. If you have the information that the tablets or the container, the blister, whatsoever, only contained 14 tablets or capsules, then of course you could assume that the duration was too short, but you don't know.
No, and that's not the action, is it? Taking it too short isn't what the error is, really. That's just happens because if in that scenario. That's all we have, I think, Caroline. Let me just double check. Oh, here we go. One more. It could be an error coding to the most general term, drug administration error.
Yes, because it's really that also regulators expect you to code as specifically as possible. That's one of the general MedDRA coding rules, code as reported. So if you have more specific information, code as specifically as possible. Try to capture the type of error and the stage where it occurred.
That's great. Thank you, Caroline. I'll leave you to get on because I'm just looking at time. Yeah. I know you've got more to do.
Next one, patient took more than the prescribed dose to get a better drug effect. So let's look at the verbatim and answer again the relevant questions. Is it reported whether it was accidental or intentional? Yes, we know that the patient consciously decided to take more than the recommended dose to get a better drug effect. Do we know who caused it? Yes, it was a decision of the patient. And was it in the framework of therapeutic use of the product? Yes, it was. We wanted to get a better drug effect. We also know the stage where the error occurred. We know it was administered, but no contributing factor was reported. So your turn again. Patient took more than the prescribed dose to get a better drug effect. What are we looking at here? Unapproved dose administered, would this be a suitable LLT, or intentional overdose, or increased dose administered, or intentional misuse by dose change, or incorrect dosage administered? Again, remember the difference between dose and dosage. I've shown you before in the concept descriptions. So let's see what you're going for. Intentional misuse of dose change is the most popular decision here. Incorrect dosage administered, intentional overdose are other options that you have selected. So let's look at our decision chart first. Here we have a different scenario. We know that it was intentional. We know that it was caused by the patient. And we know that it was for therapeutic reasons, meaning that this verbatim really describes an intentional drug misuse, an intentional product misuse. And let me again switch to the browser quickly. So if I look for this HLT here, HLGT, off-label uses and intentional product misuses, use issues, and open it with this clicking on this plus sign here. Here we have the HLT for the intentional product misuses. And we have an PT for intentional device misuse. We have an intentional product misuse, It's not a drug delivery system, so we would look for suitable term under intentional product misuse. And here we have a dose change by dose change in dosing frequency and product use duration. So we know that the patient took more than the prescribed dose, so he changed the dose. Intentional misuse by dose change would be the most specific LLT that we can assign here. And most of you got it right. The other option that we had was intentional overdose. You'll find it in these intentional overdoses in NEC here, intentional overdose, but our verbatim alone does not allow for classification as an intentional overdose. More information about the drug and the labeled dose range would be needed to do so. So intentional overdose would be incorrect. And all the other options that we had in the poll that were offered there were incorrect. Unapproved dose administered, increased dose administered, incorrect dosage administered do not represent intentional drug misuse, but drug administration errors or issues. So here we are. Here are our options. You see that all the others are grouped under medication errors, product use errors and issues, or under overdoses. NEC, here we have the intentional misuse by dose change grouped under HLGT, off-label uses and intentional product misuses, use issues, and HLT, intentional product misuses. So this would be the correct LLT that should be assigned. And most of you got it right. Here we are. Intentional misuse by dose change, under PT, intentional product misuse. Questions, Jane?
No, no questions. Oh, here we go. Yes, we have got a couple, Caroline. How vaccine administration error, either improper technique or breach of aseptic condition, would be coded. I think that one is too specific for today.
It's too specific, yeah. We don't have the time to really address such, but you will find suitable LLTs in MedDRA. I know, yeah, for such scenarios, for vaccines.
And well. The next question does relate to this, which is just commenting that dose change does not specify whether it's a higher or lower dose.
Yeah, that's true, but there is no more specific term under this PT that is available. We would like to classify it as intentional product misuse, because that is what this verbatim is representing. And we would look for the most specific, the most suitable LLT that we could find. And this is the best, we always say, the best approximation to what has been reported. You could, of course, submit a change request in order to get a more specific term. But at least we capture the fact that the dose was changed intentionally for therapeutic purposes by the patient.
Thank you, Caroline. No more.
Next one. Doctor prescribed drug A off-label for suppression of preterm labor after careful risk-benefit assessment. Again, we would look for, do we know whether it was accidental or intentional? Yes, it was accidental. We know that the healthcare professional triggered it. It was for a therapeutic purpose. At which stage? Prescribing stage, we know. And we have no contributing factors. So what would you do with this one? Doctor prescribed drug A off-label for suppression of preterm labor after careful risk-benefit assessment. Would you select drug use for unapproved indication, drug prescribing error, drug prescribed for unapproved indication, off-label use in unapproved indication, intentional use for unlabeled indication? What would you do? Yes, most of you are going for off-label use, others for intentional use, drug prescribed for unapproved indication, drug use for unapproved indication disappeared. So off-label use and unapproved indication seems to be the favorite assignment. So here again, our flow chart, decision chart. It is an intentional event. We know who triggered it. It was the healthcare professional for therapeutic purposes, off-label use. And we know that we see that off-label use is explicitly mentioned in the verbatims, so we can really use an off-label use term for coding purposes. So let me again switch to the browser. If I search for off-label use, here we have the off-label uses. Here's the misuse, intentional. Here are the off-label uses. We have two PTs under HLT, off-label uses, off-label use and off-label use of device. And if I click on this PT, you see that there are more specific LLTs underneath off-label use PT. Dosing frequency, dosing amount, fractional dose, use duration, unapproved age group, unapproved indication, unapproved route of administration, unapproved sex, off-label vaccine use. So here, off-label use in unapproved indication would be the most specific term that we can use for coding this verbatim. Here again, the options. So this is the only one that really represents an off-label use that was clearly reported in our verbatim. Off-label use in unapproved indication. All others do not represent off-label use. So here is the final proposal. Off-label use in unapproved indication under PT, off-label use. Questions, Jane?
No new questions.
Okay, but I think we discussed the off-label use problem and how to code them in detail today. So hopefully it is clear to everyone. So the last one. Doctor mixed up the drug names because they look similar and prescribed the wrong medication. What can we take from this verbatim? Do we know whether this was accidental or intentional? Yes, we know that it was accidental. We know who caused it, who made the decision. It was the doctor. And we know that it was in the context of therapeutic use. Yes, it was. And we also know the stage where the error, where it occurred, the prescribing stage. And was there a contributing factor that needs to be captured? Yes. In this instance, we have a contributing factor that was reported. So what would you do with this one? Which LLT or LLTs would you assign? Wrong drug administered, wrong drug prescribed, wrong drug, product confusion, drug name lookalike, or drug prescribing issue. Let's see what you're going for. Exactly. So this is what has been reported. The wrong drug was prescribed. We would always try to capture, let me close the poll. We would always try to capture the stage where the error occurred. So here the prescribing stage and the type of error. So it was the wrong drug that was prescribed. Perfect combination term for the error. And then we have the contributing factor. Product confusion would be too vague. We know that the doctor mixed up the drug names. So drug name lookalike is a very good LLT to capture this scenario, this contributing factor. Here again, our decision chart. We know it was accidental. It was caused by the doctor in the framework of therapeutic use. So it's definitely a medication error. So let me again switch to the browser. And if I enter wrong drug, Then I find wrong drug prescribed. It's here. If I go to the browser, you will see that we are here in HLT product prescribing errors and issues. It was an error. So here the wrong drug was prescribed. And so now what about the contributing factor? We have the product confusion terms over here, product confusion terms. And again, we would look under product name confusion. Product name confusion is a separate PT in this HLT, and here we have the drug name confusion, drug name look-alike, drug name sound-alike. So this is what we would select in this instance. So in this instance, we have a reported contributing factor that we should capture so that it is clear what has caused this error, so that measures can be taken in order to avoid it in the future. Here we are. Again, the different options that we had in the poll, and wrong drug prescribed and drug name look-alike would be the correct code assignments here. The names look similar, so drug name look-alike would be the most specific term that we can assign. Are there questions, Jane?
No, Carol-Ann. No questions, Carol-Ann. Oh, here we are. Yes, there is one, just slipped in. What is the difference between name and label confusion?
So the label is what is put on either the container, or also the leaflet instructions are part of the label. So it's what is written for using the drug, either the label that is put on the container, or the package of the drug, or the leaflet that is contained in the package in order to instruct patients how to use the drug. But here we have a drug name confusion. There's also something for drug container confusion, because drug container containers can look very similar, although they contain either different drugs or different strengths of drugs or different formulations, and this can also be a reason for such a confusion and subsequent medication errors. So here's the summary of what we have discussed today, and that's the last option, or the last chance for questions here. And if there are no further questions, I just would like to make you aware about different channels or sources where you can find additional information. The email of the MedDRA help desk, where you can address questions that you have related to the documentation, where to find it, any problems that you have with the tools whatsoever. The website that I've shown you, where you find really lots of information, not only the support documentation, but also explanations how to submit change requests, etc., etc. Here, the links to the browsers, the MedDRA browsers that we offer, the desktop browser, the new web-based browser that I was using today, our legacy one, and we also have a mobile one. Change request submission, here is the link where to do it, training schedule, MedDRA support documentation. What I would also like to make you aware of, that we have now a learning management system. It provides you with a controlled environment for self-learning videos. You have a predefined learning path. There is the beginner levels, advanced levels. You can choose to either have a certificate or non-certificate track, whatever you like. There's an unlimited number of accounts per organization. It was launched in January this year. And here are some topics that are addressed: overview of MedDRA coding and analysis, about outcomes, pregnancy terms, some interactive MedDRA coding examples, and also the medication errors and are addressed with other additional examples. So if you would like to learn more, I can only recommend to really access this learning management system. Here is how you can do so. Here's the you can log in via this QR code, or here the learning management system link where you can access the material. And last but not least, what I would like to show you, this is how you can contact the MSSO via help desk. We also have social media channels, different WhatsApp and WeChat groups in different languages that you can see here. And I would like to show you our YouTube channel because this may be useful for you. So let me visit the so here's our MedDRA website. So here's contact. If you click on contact, this page that I have just shown you on the screenshot will open. And if you click on this icon here, YouTube channel, you see all the recorded sessions of our trainers. So regarding coding instructions for basic coding, advanced coding learners, also data analysis, data retrieval, standardized MedDRA queries are offered. For newcomers, there's what is MedDRA and how is it used webinar, very useful for newcomers. And you see the medication error workshops that we provided already. So if you are interested in more examples, this is the place to go. Also, we have medication error webinars in different languages. So if you're not a native English speaker and would like to attend one of these courses in your native language, you could do so in Spanish. And for instance, so just look out for such trainings. So this is what I wanted to show you. And with this, and if there are no further questions, did we receive last-minute questions?
No
Jane?
more questions. No last-minute questions, Carol-Ann.
Okay. So with this, yeah, I hope that you found this webinar helpful for your work, and also hope to meet you again in one of our MSSO webinars, or also in a face-to-face training in the future. Maybe also face-to-face training of Jane. She's providing a lot of them. So thank you for joining us today, and also a big thank you to you, Jane, for your great support, like always. So enjoy the rest of your day, and a warm goodbye to all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you, Carol-Ann. Bye-bye.